What's up, you bastards? Welcome back to another video on the channel, where today we're back with another Redux top 5. The last one we did was the first one we did, and it was the top 5 Redux weapons. But in today's video, we're going to be switching it up and talking about something a little bit different and maybe a little bit more exciting for those of you who haven't played the mod. It's the top 5 Pearlescents in Redux. Now, do remember that for this list, it's going to include Redux weapons as well as base game weapons that were transformed into Pearls, and also do bear in mind that you could be watching this video 4 months from when it goes out, where some of these Pearlescents have been changed or vaulted. So at the time of this video, here are my top 5 Pearlescents in Redux mod. Just remember, this is only my opinion and it is not factual. I know people think that because I made the mod, I instantly know what the best guns are. That is not the case. I'm sure there's going to be a bunch of Redux players saying that I don't know fuck about the game, and I mean, to be fair, it's probably... Anyway, coming in at the number 5 spot, it has to be, for me, the Pearl of Ineffable Knowledge. If you don't know what this thing is, it's an artifact that drops from the DLC 2 final mission, and it also, in Redux, drops from Scourge the Invincible Martyr. And the Pearl of Ineffable Knowledge is essentially just a stacking damage boost every time you land a hit on an enemy. I don't want to spend too long talking about this item because a lot of people already know why it is so good. I mean, it is just something which you can slap on and make any build like really less sucky, I guess you could say, would be the right way to describe this item. And I know it's not the best, and that's why it's at the top 5 spot, but I couldn't help but put it on the list because it's such a classic and it does such a good job at helping you out with your builds. So for that reason, the Pearl of Ineffable Knowledge is my number 5 pick. Coming in at number 4, this is another base game item which is a Pearlescent in Redux, and it was originally going to be my number 5 spot, but I do believe it belongs at the number 4 spot instead. This is going to be the Torg Moonfire Revolver. Not pistol, revolver. For those of you who don't know, in the Redux mod, some items and weapons were overhauled to feel or function differently, and the Moonfire is one of them. It now features a really much slowed down rate of fire, and in return, the amped shot that it fires will be much more strong. For those of you who don't know, every shot that the Moonfire fires will deal like crazy increased amp damage, so that's its like special effect. But yes, in the mod, it's less of a pistol that you can spam by just fanning the hammer, and more of a pistol which turns into a revolver in the way it behaves and the way it outputs damage. Now, is it the best Pearlescent? Absolutely not, though if you're running a crit build on Zane or maybe 3-shot fadeaway flak, the Moonfire is going to be a solid pick for you, and it's very good against humanoid targets. If you want to get a Moonfire, they drop from Wotan the Invincible. I should also say that all of these Pearlescents are locked to Mayhem 6 and above, but I mean, that's on the Wikipedia. Moving on to the number 3 spot, we've got the first Redux weapon on the list, and it is going to be none other than the Florentine. The Florentine is a Maliwan SMG which drops from the Omega Manticore the Invincible out in Desolation's Edge, and the Florentine is a caster which shoots dual elements, being shock and radiation. The Florentine gets the number 3 spot just because of how insanely powerful it is and how great it works with SMG builds. I mean, there is really no character that can't make the Florentine work. It's just a really easygoing weapon which is going to help you progress through a lot of the content in Redux. So just overall a very nice SMG. It's not the most unique SMG, it's not the craziest SMG, but it is an SMG which I feel is extremely powerful and definitely deserves the number 3 spot. Now, moving into the number 2 spot, this is where it was very hard for me to pick between the two, but it has to be the Midnight Wisdom. The Midnight Wisdom is an extremely powerful weapon, and that's why it's in the number 2 spot. But the problem with the Midnight Wisdom for me, as I'm pretty sure I discussed in the Redux weapons video, is undoubtedly the forced element lock. Only being able to deal shock damage with this weapon, while it is very handy for stuff like the Guardians and the Guardian Takedown, there's no reason why that couldn't just roll normally. So I don't see it as a crazy pro for the gun that it does shock damage. I mean, there's a lot of other good choices in weapons that roll in the shock element. So I'm not going to give the Midnight Wisdom any real crazy props for having shock as an element. I'm going to see it as a con. If this thing fired fire damage or corrosive or radiation or hell even cryo, it would easily be the #1 pick. The Midnight Wisdom is extremely powerful. It is one of the strongest guns in the mod by far. But locking it to the shock element undoubtedly does leave it useless in fights like Hemovorus and fights like the Manticore. If you're running someone like Moze, yes, you can get Skagsden on it, but with Skagsden not having crazy mayhem scaling in the mod, it really doesn't make the Midnight Wisdom insanely overpowered like it maybe would have in base game. For that reason, I've got to put the Midnight Wisdom in at the #2 spot, and I don't want it to sound like I don't like the gun. I do like the gun, I very much so like the gun, and it kills 90% of things that you take it up against. It's just gonna fall short because of the lack of elements. Now, before we get into the #1 spot, I do have to give an honorable mention here to the Interfacer shotgun. The reason why the Interfacer shotgun missed being on this list is because in my Redux weapons video, I had it at #1. And I can't just put it at #1 in the Redux weapons video if it's also a Pearlescent, because that would spoil this list, and that would be no fun. So the Interfacer, while it would have been my #1 pick, has to be an honorable mention just for the sake of the list. But I guess you could pair it with the #1 and say that they're both on the same level. But yes, the Interfacer sadly is going to fall into the honorable mention slot due to the other list. But finally, coming in at #1, it's none other than the Norfleet. The Norfleet returning in Redux is one of the biggest things the mod has done to date, and it is by far the strongest rocket launcher, hands down. There is nothing stronger than the Norfleet rocket launcher wise in the mod. Stuff like the Red Eye rocket pod or the plumage, while they are very, very, very powerful, still do not touch the Norfleet's power. And anyone in Redux who has picked up the Norfleet will tell you the exact same thing. It is insanely overpowered. Now, there are some of you who are going to call me out on this. Yeah, but Epic, you don't like the Norfleet. Of course I don't like the Norfleet because I hate the massive splash damage on it, but it is the strongest weapon. I mean, for the Pearlescent category, there is no other weapon which I feel embodies an amazing rocket launcher like the Norfleet. The ammo count is fantastic, the splash is fantastic, the mobbing potential is fantastic, and while it is an extremely rare rocket launcher to get dropped from Vermivorous the Invincible, it is insanely overpowered. And it also falls into my #1 spot because the farming of the Norfleet can be more rewarding than you'd think. The Midnight Wisdom from the #2 pick, which I forgot to mention, drops from Hemovorous the Invincible. So you can get 2 Pearlescents in one run if you're lucky, and that for me is just an added pro to farming for something like the Norfleet, because you can also get something like the Midnight Wisdom, which is extremely good too. But with its amazing splash damage, its crazy splash radius, and also stuff like the amount of ammo it costs to shoot one of these bad boys out, I mean, how can you not put the Norfleet at #1 for the Pearlescents? Again, it's not my favorite Pearlescent. It's not a Pearlescent which I go out of my way to farm. I'm just not a big fan of it. But I will say it is probably one of the best Pearlescents in the mod, and for that reason, it has to go at the #1 spot. But anyway, that's going to do it for this list. Thank you guys so much for watching. Let me know what your top 5 list would be in the comment section down below, and I'll pin the best one that I see. And yeah, I mean, that's about it really. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.